Our guest this evening, you may know from the Sci-Fi Channel. He's appeared in Ghost Hunters as well as every episode of Ghost Hunters International. His name is Barry Fitzgerald. Besides being a paranormal investigator, this 2012 Sexiest Man of the Year is a very notable Irish author, having penned many books, including The Complete Approach, The Influence, My Home is Haunted, Now What?, In the Midst of Gods, Banshee, Searching the Sid, a series of investigative stories called Legend Seekers, the fictional trilogy The Council of Three, and his latest, which we will discuss tonight, along with some of the others I just mentioned, titled The Deception of Gods and Men. Now, Barry loves photography and prefers to be away from the cell phone and basically explore the world around him. In Peru, he recently photographed a UFO. He loves to utilize photography to show people how he sees the world. Now, Barry Fitzgerald has done an extensive investigation on animal sensitivity to the paranormal. He discovered that horses, ferrets, golden labs are the most sensitive to paranormal activity, whereas chocolate labs were found to be useless in detecting paranormal activity. Now, the Sexiest Man of the Year loves walking, nature, history, especially World War II history, researching his ancestry and his Irish heritage. So let's sit back and take a trip to Ireland as we visit with our mate, Barry Fitzgerald. Barry, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. It's great to have you. And I'm sorry, now I have to explain something. During that thing, when I said about the sexiest man alive, I actually snickered even when I said it. And it wasn't because I was snickering that you were chosen that. It's like I know I could see his face even before we got to this. We're on the side, I could see your face there. I knew you were just going to be like, oh no, really? So I envisioned that as I was reading this little script and started to laugh. Okay, even with the black labs, I feel
Yeah,
so sorry for the black labs. But anyway, Barry, thank you for joining us tonight on our show. It's really great to have you here.
thanks very much, Steve, for having me on. I appreciate it, and I have to say that series of photographs that you had up there in the intro certainly brought me back down memory lane.
Well, I had to laugh because one of the pictures I intentionally chose was Paul Bradford trying to walk up because I saw when you saw that you started to laugh, and I know Paul. I've seen him. We do enough paracons that my
Yes.
wife's group and stuff, and I've
Uh-huh.
seen Paul in enough places, and I
Yeah.
just figured I just had to pick on him. So he looked like he was having a heart attack coming up front of up to there, but
Truth be told, that was taken in Italy, and I think, to be honest, we were all having a heart attack at that particular moment.
God bless you because even without the IPF, I'm not sure I would have walked all the way up that.
Yeah, yeah.
So as I start with all of my guests, let's go way back. Okay, what was it like growing up for you? Um, I know you grew up in a house that was haunted and stuff,
Hmm.
and I'm sure that's what piqued your interest in the paranormal.
Well, it certainly was one of those things that it was a cornerstone into my I suppose life's path of investigating the paranormal. Um, at the time, I was born in Northern Ireland, and and every day you turned on the TV, even as a child, you heard about the explosions, the gunfire, and all of that stuff. And you kind of way become desensitized to it. It doesn't seem to affect you after a while. And this was going on years and years and years. But um, from my perspective, I have to say that my parents did a wonderfully remarkable job of bringing four kids into the world. And we ended up moving into this particular house, and we, we as children didn't know anything of the history of the house. Um, and my parents did a great job in sheltering us from that. Uh, but it seems that the town itself was well aware that there was something odd that went on and within that house. And certainly after we left the house, I had my experiences there as a young child. My mother had experiences there as well, but after leaving, there was a series of families moved in behind us, and they were moving out quicker and quicker and quicker until it got to a stage where the house was just left empty. And the strange thing was, Steve, that I do not recall anything outside of seeing a particular one apparition in that particular house, which I didn't know what I was seeing as a child. Um, but outside of seeing that, I do not recall any bad memories in that house. Yet, right up into my adulthood, and until a few years ago, my dreams were haunted by something that was in that house. And every time I dreamt of the house, I was always fixated with anxiety, um, and 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 I always was trying to warn people who were moving in, do not move in here. There is something in here. Do not move in. And this was in my dreams. It plagued my dreams. And every time that I was having this dream, the house was falling into a greater state of disrepair. And I haven't been back in my hometown now in years, and I didn't know what was happening, but it seems that the house was indeed falling into a state of disarray. And eventually, I went up and I seen my parents, and I happened to look out the window and look down where the old house was, and it was gone. It had been destroyed and leveled, and that's when the dreams stopped. So I don't know what actually happened back then that I've forgotten.
I was just going to say, do you think that activity did happen to you as a child, but you just don't remember it?
It can, the way the phenomena works, it can affect us in certain ways. There is a particular thing that I talk about, and it's called the 20-second rule. And what tends to happen is that when the phenomena makes itself known, when you're chosen, and it decides that it's going to communicate or whatever it's doing, uh, you have 20 seconds in which your body is your instinct is telling you whether the nature of this is positive or whether it's negative. But we don't know now. When in the modern age, we don't understand those particular signals, and we don't listen for those signals anymore. Now we can still see them in science. We can see their effects in the laboratory, but consciously we have forgotten. But within the first 20 seconds, we're being warned as to whether this particular apparition, of whatever form it takes, is beneficial to us or not. If the phenomena rides over 20 seconds, what tends to happen is that we see the brain rhythms change and the people are pushed into the theta band. And from there, then you have false memory that can be implanted. Um, you have memory that can be overridden. You have um, various different stages that would be very beneficial for phenomena to cover its tracks. Now, this is also the state, I have to say, that we tend to go into when we want to communicate with this phenomena in its multifaceted appearances. Uh, so it's a double-edged sword there, but usually the 20-second rule is something that I tend to use all the time in my investigations, and no matter what I'm investigating, and if someone's with me, I'll say, be very aware of your body's responses, and be very diligent, and cognizant of that 20 seconds.
Well, you actually talked about the foods that we eat can
Oh
affect.
yeah, yeah. Mm,
And see, for me, I've been doing this 45 years.
mm,
I don't know what I'm investigating today. I don't know if it's UFOs. Well, I'm completely like, out
mhm,
there. But I mean, when I was going after what I was seeing, I never thought any time of to watch for sugars. I mean, I'm a diabetic, but still, I never
mm.
thought to watch for stuff like that. And you say that the food can affect our fight or flight.
Oh, absolutely. And the fight or flight is our instinct. That's our gift of discernment. So that's how we understand what is going on. Now, how effective the fight or flight is, I'll give you an example. There were laboratory tests that were conducted into biofeedback. And biofeedback is the measurement of our skin resistance.
Right.
And the computer screen was randomly selecting multiple photographs of cats, kitty cats, and babies laughing and things like that. Things that make us happy when we see them. Um, but in through those photographs, there was one random photograph that was selected by the computer, not by a person, not by a researcher. It was by the computer. And it would have thrown that picture up, which would have been a horrific car accident. So the moment that we see the car accident, our skin resistance rises, and our fight or flight starts to cut in. Now we can see that within the laboratory. That is science. That's the way it works. But what was interesting is that as the experiment continued, and this random photograph was being brought in over a period of time, the body started reacting milliseconds before the photograph was actually selected. In other words, the body was predicting the future and preparing for what was about to come.
Wow.
So that is the fight or flight. That's what it does. And when we go into this aspect of a building, let's say an old warehouse or something that's haunted, or we don't even know it's haunted, um, and all of a sudden the hair goes up in the back of our necks. That's our fight or flight. That's our instinct telling us beware. There's another one here. So that's the key to the 20-second rule. That's what you need to watch out for. And the problem with foods today is that we have a growing amount of food that contains refined sugar, and the refined sugar can actually shut off the fight or flight response. So if we meet up, say, in a fast food restaurant, and we have a quart
McDonald's.
of soda drinks or whatever the case may be, that refined sugar can blind you as a researcher going into the investigation, and that is not a place that we should be.
No.
So yeah, so that's the food in it, the food and what we consume can affect the way that we work, and also understanding that as well, that it also aids our defense. So we, I suppose, as paranormal researchers, that many of us are being called into properties to help families. So in essence, we are the paranormal first aiders, but we have to be careful there, because who helps the first aider?
Hmm.
So you got to make sure that you're right first.
I've seen a lot of people in this field that have been in for a long time just suddenly just say, that's it, I'm out, can't do this
Yep.
anymore.
Hmm.
And I've been, I guess, knock on wood, you're lucky in 45 years that I haven't turned my head and
Hmm.
walked away. But I also know I'm also a musician too on the side. I know I can't put those guitars down,
Yes. Uh-huh.
okay, because it's in my blood, just
Yes.
like paranormal, it's in my
Hmm.
blood.
Hmm.
When I
Hmm.
started when I was like 17,
Yeah.
I saw a full bodied apparition walk right past me. Saw it with my own two eyes.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
sober, no drugs, no drinking.
Yeah.
Okay. There was
Yeah.
actually a person there.
Hmm.
And I never stopped looking because to this day I'm still wondering what it is that's there. Um, I don't think I could quit.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
talked about earlier about going to Florida before we
Yeah.
came on. Yeah, I'm not even going to quit down there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my wife said, "What do we do with all this equipment?" It's like, with us, okay? What we're going to do with this equipment, okay? It's
Yeah.
coming with me, okay? It's,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, two
It
places in
it's it's
Florida.
it's strange. It can be your calling, and some people come into it, and they they fly through it, and they're out the other side, and they go off and have the rest of their life. And some people stay in it. People like yourself and myself as well included. We're in it for the long haul.
See,
And
you guys started, and I said this to Grant many years ago. when I met him. I was like, it's your fault. And he looked at me and he was like, what? Okay, you can only imagine. I was like, no, because you put this TV show on, all of a sudden we were no longer geeks
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
those weird guys that wanted to investigate ghosts. Okay,
Hmm.
you made it mainstream, but by making it mainstream, it also brought in all these other people that wanted that 10 minutes of fame.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
personally still think most people want what I call the haunted house, the fun house, haunted house effect.
Yeah.
They want to go in there and something come out from behind the wall, boom, and scare them. And that's what they're going to want for the night. Oh, I can never forget that day when someone jumped in. No, that's not what this is all about. You
Hmm.
know as well as I do how many hours do you sit inside of an open room,
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
where nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And if you're like me, you start to question, like, all right, where did I bang my head earlier in life?
Yeah.
You're talking to an empty room. There's something wrong with that. Um, think UFOs play into any of this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I find them intrinsically connected, and that's an uncomfortable thing for many paranormal researchers to try and come to terms with. And likewise, it's just as equally problematic for ufologists. Um, but if we consider the likes of, for instance, say Skinwalker Ranch over in Utah.
I was going to.
I was there in 2019, just before the lockdowns came in, and the UFOs, of course, are big in that particular area, and a lot of the ranch became famous because of the UFO phenomena.
Mhm.
But what wasn't reported because of funding, because initially, of course, it was about researching the high strangeness from the ufological perspective. But what actually outpaced the ufology was the paranormal. There was more paranormal encounters happening there than there was ufology.
They talked
But
about
because of the paranormal, it's seen as this mad woo woo. If they happen to mention that to Congress, the plug would have been pulled much earlier.
See, I know they talked about on the show at least. I was probably season one, a little bit of season two. There was some section of the ranch where they were talking about paranormal activity.
Mm,
But
hmm.
then that seemed with the UAPs that went right away, and they were looking.
Well, there is some things going on out there, but
Yeah,
there's a
gunshots.
lot that isn't necessarily being addressed, such as the 1.6 gigahertz signal
Mm-hmm.
that's being picked up. And that in itself is a signal being used by US military. That particular frequency is for that. And whenever we start to look at the types of technology that is being utilized, we can see that there is things that we would call a tic tac, which is supplying data, real time data, to various components within the battlefield, and at staggering data paces, which of course are also utilizing 1.6 gigahertz. So what I tend to find is that there are certain areas that weapons manufacturing and development go hand in hand with this phenomenon.
So, what do you think? I mean, I'm going to move away from Skinwalker, but
Mm,
I know you heard the gunshots. I saw the video, okay, where you had to leave
mm,
because they were sort of giving you a hint to get out of there.
mm.
What do you really think is going on there? Do you think they?
My own personal opinion is that it's about gold. It's about gold and silver.
Really?
Um, and if we look at some of the folks involved who are responsible for developing technology that looks for um, valuable metals under the ground, deep underground, the technology has been designed for that. And we also see that there are certain clues that are available as well, on the let's say on the face of it all. You see, from a Celtic perspective, what we knew that that looked after huge amounts of gold and treasure and silver and everything else, were these giant serpents. From a Celtic perspective, there were giant serpents
Mhm.
that guarded the earth's wealth. Now, over a period of time and moving into the medieval period, of course, they changed into dragons. Um, but on face value, who guards Skinwalker Ranch with the guns? The dragon.
Right.
The symbolism's there, and understanding a lot of the phenomena there, that can be mixed up with that. There is a lot to be said about the natural wealth that is still available within the Uinta Basin, and I think that is a huge part and parcel to play in what's going on in Utah.
Why would the government walk away from that?
Well, the government themselves were also utilizing other ranches at the same time. I believe there was five ranches that were bought, four or five ranches that were also producing their own phenomena,
Mm-hmm.
and across, it was a broad spectrum of phenomena, including UFOs. So where we tended to find that particular phenomena was, there were shared, um, um, what would you call it? There was fundamental similarities along with Skinwalker and these other ranches, um, in various aspects, which I won't go into at the minute, because that delves into my next book that I'm writing, Beyond the Veil, where I really go beyond, and follow the science into what is going on here.
Well, this is actually but a good segue into the book we were going to talk about tonight,
Hmm.
okay, which was the deception of gods and men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the first thing I remember, I read through the book a couple of days ago, and then we've had so much going on. I tried going through some of it today. In fact, I even have my iPad sitting here, okay, because I went back and read back through it again here. But the one thing I remember is, and if I mispronounce stuff, just correct me, the Anunnakis,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
okay, and the Watchers.
Mhm.
Now, and what is it, the Biru? Is that how that's pronounced? Nibiru?
In the brew.
Okay, there you go.
Mhm.
Okay, now I've watched a lot of videos just way before we even talked about doing the show
Mhm.
about watches and stuff and
Yeah.
this civilization of the Anunnakis. Do you think that that's really where part of where our civilization currently came from? And then,
I think that particular mask, if you like, because within the book, it's very important for me to start off by saying that a lot of the phenomena, in fact, a huge majority of the phenomena that we're dealing with in all its multifacets, originates from the same source,
mm,
and a huge amount of manipulation goes on there. And I believe that the Anunnaki was one of those. I believe that it was a corruption and a deception utilized to keep our vision off the target. And what tended to happen is that throughout history, multiple times, when we got too close and when we started to break free, um, reset. There's a term that we're coming to hear more and more often today,
reset.
um, where we start to break free, and we start to become like gods themselves. Oh no, reset.
Hmm. A friend of mine that lived in Scotland, Kev Baker, used to talk about the Great Reset. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's one of the things that I don't know. I read your books. I shouldn't say book. I read your book, some of the folklore and everything else.
Hmm.
But the more I was getting into this one, at first when I started to read it, I was like, okay, is this something that's going to be for me? But then as I started to read it, and the more I got into it, the more, you know, you went into the Knights Templar, okay?
Hmm.
You followed straight through with stuff, and even with the floods, okay? One of the things I wrote here, They escaped the Great Flood by hiding in the caves and caverns
Hmm.
within the earth. So that sort of made me start thinking about the skinwalker analogy,
Hmm.
because aren't we looking at these UAPs that thinking went inside the earth?
Well, that's the thing. We see a lot of the phenomena happen over rock strata,
Mhm.
and that can be either phenomena disappearing into rock cliffs, or emanating in and out of caves, or stone plateaus. And this goes across all of the fringe research field. There are videos out there on YouTube that distinctly show the UFOs flying straight into the rock face. Um, Now, it should be pointed out, the idea that, well, what do you mean that there's, are you saying that there's a hollow Earth down there? That's not what I'm saying at all. Um, but I should point out that it is now a common belief within science that they're now starting to see that there's more life under our feet than there is around them. Now, I'm not saying that there are huge Tyrannosaurus Rexes to 20 miles down. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the fundamental aspects to life itself can be found underneath our feet. And possibly that biogenesis event maybe just didn't happen the once. There may have been more.
Well, there's definitely, I believe there's been more civilizations
Mm,
besides the one we're in now.
hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And
Oh, there has indeed.
yeah,
And but again, when we see that we're becoming successful, um, we're hit by this reset. And I see this analogy within the ancient stories of Babel and the tower. The idea that humanity suddenly was working together, and they were climbing this tower to be like the gods, and this was frowned upon. So our voices were scattered, and languages were changed, and everything else, and the Great Reset happened. Um, Imagine what humanity can accomplish whenever we're not fighting each other, and we're not lost by different voices and different languages. Imagine what we could accomplish.
I've always said that here in the States, united we stand, divided we fall.
Time and time
Because,
again.
here we just went through yesterday or the day before elections here,
Mm-hmm.
and we all want the same thing. But if we can split us up thought wise, put the Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other, have them fight against each other, I did magic for a number of years, misdirection.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just sit.
Absolutely, absolutely. I often see Earth as a chicken coop. The farmer doesn't have to be there all the time because the chickens rule the chickens.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I live in farmland. I can tell you that's probably pretty true. Um, the Knights Templar.
Hmm.
Explain to our audience how the Knights Templar became involved in all of this.
Well, that was my co-author Brian went down that particular route. I can't remember offhand what the involvement is now.
He was
Um,
sort of saying, if I remember correctly, it was that after the flood and we came out of the flood and stuff, when the money, they went for the money because they
mm,
said that, my brain is second to function here. They, the Knights Templar obviously had all the real estate. They were the bankers for everything. And
mhm.
that's when supposedly they stood in and took their place and were starting to take over all of that.
Yeah, they definitely did that, and certainly from our aspect of what we conceive a bank to be today in the modern context was invented by the Knights Templar.
Mhm.
But of course, the Knights Templar were brought down Friday the 13th in such and such a date. Uh, but that necessarily wasn't because of they needed to be taken down. It was because of greed, and the French king, of course, that was heavily in debt to the Knights Templar,
Mhm.
and wanted a lot of their stuff back. But yeah, the Knights Templar, they have a lot, and they also have a lot of secrets. They took a lot of secrets from the east and brought them west. And those secrets, of course, included uh, frequency, vibration, and all of that, which was incorporated within their buildings.
See, now I've seen so many videos lately on the pyramids and how the Great Pyramids were built with vibration, different
Mm,
sound
mhm.
vibrations, where
Yeah.
actually allowed things. And supposedly there's some monks somewhere that still have done this and they know how to do this. And the video that was brought back showing it was taken by a government. Can you imagine that? Okay, taking that. So it's like, I don't know, but one of the things we were talking about the reset, but you talked about the DNA. I gotta read it from here. Very
Mhm.
interesting theory that our DNA gradually mutates and evolves and allows us to change a species, but the basic blueprint is retained, so the process can be repeated all over again.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
So is
Yeah.
that what you're talking about with the reset, where we would just
No, the reset itself is very, very different. The reset is where we lose knowledge, and we're set into complete disaster. And again, we've seen this moving back thousands of years. We could see traits of this reset, but the problem was, you see, those particular resets were pretty much based in the Mediterranean and places like that, where you had the five main uh, big cultures and civilizations. So when you had famine coming in and things like that, and people attacking other civilizations, that of course was taking its toll on and adding extra stress. The only ones who really made it through were the Egyptians, and they barely, barely made it through by the skin of their teeth. They had invaders coming down, and were burning the grain stores and things like that. So they barely made it through. But what we're seeing today is not just a regional reset. This is a global reset. This hasn't happened before.
scary?
Yeah, it can be, but I'm weighing on the positive side. I'm saying, let's give it a chance. There are some things we could change. There are, but I prefer time to change. And I can be very, very resistant. I'm one of those people who, I don't like being told what to do. Let me make my own mind up, and give me the reasons why, and I'll mull it over and say, okay, let's do this.
In this country, people have already given up their minds. Okay, they're
Mm.
being told what to do, and they run and they do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't like being lied to.
and they'll
Um,
come here.
so the that's where I would start digging my heels in.
Hmm.
Uh, so be honest with me, and let me figure it out in my mind.
That wipes out every politician in this. Be honest with
Yes, it
me, okay?
does.
It's not on their list of qualifications. Okay, but I'm going to go a step further because I wanted to keep moving on it. Psychic tests, and I found that whole thing pretty interesting because you were talking about part of seances and
Mm.
all of that. I mean, there was some interesting stuff in there because I was starting to read, wow, they were making things appear and stuff, and not
Oh yeah,
realizing,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that
There were, those particular experiments you were talking about was the skull experiments that were conducted over on the east coast of the UK. Now these experiments were happening in the late 1990s, which run the course of around 5 years, and twice a week they met in this basement, and they were having encounters with this phenomena that was coming through the veil, and it would present itself in various different formats. For instance, some sitters would be sitting, and in fact, one of them's a very good acquaintance of mine, and he was sitting in circle in the darkness, and all of a sudden he felt a hand place itself on his hand, and he followed it up the elbow, expecting someone to be there, and there was nothing after the elbow. So this phenomena has the ability to manifest itself. So the idea of nuts and bolts and all the rest, anything can be manifested, which was very apparent within the seance room. And also small UFOs began to appear in the seance room. And they projected these little lights onto the table and they flew around and done their thing. And I thought, okay, UFOs are one thing. But when one of the aliens, one of the gray aliens appears in the seance room, that's whenever I started asking questions, going, what the hell? Why is there a gray coming into the seance room? Um, so that to me was very telling, and especially when other experiments that were going ahead as well. I have to mention that the particular species, beyond the veil, there were thousands of them trying to get back, and they have no love for humanity whatsoever. But they were trying to get back, and the experiments were shut down actually because of part of that particular connection. So
What were
my
they?
my thing is that as the experiments were continuing at school over the period of the 5 years, the majority of the time they were working in darkness or very, very faint light. Now, 20 years before in the Livermore laboratories in the United States, the scientists were doing this in broad daylight, and the phenomena was appearing in broad daylight. So again, I was seeing this deception and a set of rules that were being made, not for us, but for their own ability to keep this cloak and dagger fiasco going on. And a lot of the experiment, the scientists there in Livermore, they thought that they were going crazy, and one the phenomena actually started following them home. I remember that from the paperwork, and in fact, there was one scientist and his wife who were lying in bed, and suddenly at the bottom of the bed, this huge animal appeared. The huge bird appeared, which is not native to the United States. And another guy was in his hotel room whenever all of a sudden this huge arm materialized with a claw on the end of it, almost turning around, showing itself off, and then just
Oof.
broke apart and was gone. But again, this was in broad daylight. So 20 years later, we're forced to work in darkness. Why? If you can do it in daylight, why not do it in daylight all the time so that we can all see it and understand what's happening? But that is not what's wanted.
See, you probably got it a lot. I've had many people ask me, why do we investigate at night?
Mm,
Okay, why doesn't ghosts don't come out during the day? It's like they do, but your senses are heightened
hmm
when it's
hmm
dark. So that's why we enjoy doing it that way. Especially, if your hearing's off or vision's off, you might see something you
hmm
won't see during the daylight.
hmm
I
hmm
have to interrupt. There was a question that was sent to me. And actually, I told you there were two of them. And before we go too far, I want to do the first one. It says they want to know about, I guess, when you were on Ghost Hunters International or something. And sorry, I'm not going to ask you about an episode. I saw something. Do you remember that episode with? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm definitely, sir, will not do that to you.
Mhm.
But it's about a joke that was played on you during a Paracon in Braintree Crescent in a barn where someone threw and broke a glass cup.
I think that was Joe Chin.
That's who asked the
Um, I remember Joe the swine. Um,
question.
he, I had worked with Joe for years on the show, and we were at this barn, and there was a Roman road that was covered over, and we pulled the boards back and we looked at this Roman road. It was hundreds and hundreds of years old, centuries old, and all of a sudden Joe started going into this particular state, and the thing was, usually I tend to pick up on stuff like that, and I wasn't getting anything at all. And I was watching Joe going into this state, and then the glass was smashed, and he started delving into this type of visionary path he was going down. And I'm looking at him, thinking to myself, "Dear God, Joe, why did we not see this during the show?"
Yeah, we'll do it off camera, okay?
Yeah. Oh, he completely sold me, and then he
Mm,
started laughing and said to himself, "You
Joe
swine,
is
Joe, you swine."
Joe is a pisser, okay? I like Joe. I've met, in fact, there's pictures on my desktop as the background. I have two monitors, and there's times that there are two of Joe. There's one of a very long time ago I met Joe, and one fairly recently where I met him.
Mhm.
Now, the other question, I have a feeling you're going to figure out too, as soon as I ask the question. And it says, ask him why I sang so much better than him, but we sang You Two, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. The karaoke when we were in Puerto Rico.
Oh my goodness. Now that's testing me. Still haven't- That wouldn't be happen to be Dustin Perry by any
No, it
chance.
wasn't Dustin. Somebody who thinks he knows how to sing. I'm sorry.
I
And
don't
you
know
think
who,
Joe,
who was it.
so go along with who was Joe's sidekick?
There's Scott Tepperman. Scott
There you
Tepperman.
go.
Scott. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Scott has a Scott. He's exceptionally good at um. I think it's not wasn't Joe Pesci. It's the other guy. He plays a lot of gangster movies. I can't remember his name, but Scott Tepperman was able to do that impression to a T. And whenever he did it, I used to just bust into hysterics. It was classic. And he wasn't a bad voice either, I have to say. Um, but I do remember him in New Zealand whenever he boiled the hot dogs and they exploded. Um, I do recall that distinctly. But yeah, there was a lot of things went on in Puerto Rico. I was trying to remember. Is that the place that I had too much vodka? It could possibly be.
Probably why. Okay. I'm sure that's why Scott remembered that. But I've known Scott now for a long time. And actually, Joe has been part of that little trio of people
Yes.
that
Uh-huh.
get along really well. And Scott's moved on really well doing movies. And
Good stuff. Yeah, Scott was always into the movies. I remember that.
yep, big Honeymooners fan and big movie fan.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Collects VHS tapes. I still get to get him on the show because he thinks I'm going to make fun of him because of his VHS collection, which I do
Uh,
rather well, when I talk to on Facebook.
yeah.
But he did write a couple of books on it, and I did see some videos someplace where some of these VHS tapes are worth $500, $600, $700.
Really?
Yeah, I would think that they're garbage, but I figured,
There you
well,
go.
okay, I'll get him on and we'll talk about that. So now
Yeah.
let's go back to the book. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I had to throw those two before I
You're
forget.
all right.
Okay, Alistair Crowley.
Hmm.
Okay, as they would say in England, a very interesting bloke.
Oh. That's
Uh,
an understatement.
yeah. And then his connection to L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology
Hmm.
makes it even better. Um, Tell us about, because they tried to manifest some goddess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was quite a few things now that Alistair was getting involved with, and Hubbard as well. But in particular, Alistair, and he ended up he used this. He bought a house up in Scotland, which is in the end or the edge of a magnetic anomaly that runs along the edge of Loch Ness, famous for
Hmm.
Nessie. But he bought this cottage up there, and he started to go through this particular um, spell. And the problem with the spell is that once you start, you can't stop. You have to go to the end. But unfortunately for Alistair, he got about 3 weeks into it, and then he left and went to Paris, and that I think was a turning point for Alistair. Now Alistair was having his problems. Let's face it, he was known within the UK press as one of the most evilest men in the world.
Exactly.
A title in which he embraced, I have to say. In fact, his own mother called him the Beast, and from that he accepted that title and he went with it. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of things that he was doing, that he was engaging with, that possibly was leading to a situation in which doors were being opened but they weren't being closed. And we see that within the modern paranormal as well, when a lot of folks go into properties and they're trying to make contact with said entities, and because they don't get any response, they leave. They say, "Okay, no, there's nothing here. Let's pack up and go," but they leave the door open. The
Hmm.
intent was there to open the door. We have to use the intent to close it again, and otherwise that can lead to problems. And that was what was happening with Alistair. He was leaving himself open, and we see this through a lot of of the esoteric path, um, in that there can be a drop off. Phenomena will back off from them, when they've been used. Then the phenomena will back off, and they're left there with absolutely nothing, penniless, and everything else. And that's where Alistair was. That's where he finished.
Well, he sold his house to Jimmy Page, so it wasn't that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but it was because that thing he tried to manifest the goddess Babylon using sex magic.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he reveled in that.
Yeah, they were trying to create a child,
Mm,
two
hmm.
of them. It's like, okay, that when I read that, it was like, huh? Okay. I
Yeah, yeah,
read
yeah.
that 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, Alistair certainly was into all of it, and he didn't matter. It didn't matter what, it seems, what he was claiming on to, if you forgive the language. He didn't care,
Yeah,
and he just wanted results.
he wanted a name for himself.
Mm.
It's really
Hmm.
what he
It,
wanted.
it certainly, the promise, obviously, that some of whatever he'd been in contact with, the promises that were being made, were certainly feeding his ego. And that's where a problem begins. When it taps into the ego, that's it.
Well, people lose it at that point.
Yeah.
When the ego is stroked, they just go
Hmm.
with it at
Hmm.
that point.
Hmm.
So, how did you meet Brian Allen?
Brian's a Celtic brother. Brian he's been investigating for years, about 40 years now. Brian was investigating, and now he's 80 years of age, and he
He is young.
he plays it safe now in Scotland, living over there, and he lets me do all the footwork now.
Yeah, but he's 80 years young. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that he would agree with that.
yeah. Well, we all do when we get up here. Trust me. Okay, as the further we get, it's like the heck with that Who song. Hope I die before I get old. It's like,
Yeah.
brother. Okay, I can still see him doing that in his 70s. So I guess
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now I didn't ask earlier, and I know the question was here, but we were jumping all around my question list. But how did you go from living in a haunted house to being asked to be on Sci-Fi Ghost Hunters?
Um, well, at that particular time, Ghost Hunters was coming across to Ireland, and they were going to film here, but they had asked a friend of mine, in Washington D.C., if they knew anyone who could help them out sorting something like a fixer, in Ireland, and they said, "Well, actually, we do. We know Barry." So that's where I was brought into it. But as fate would have it, one of the guys was afraid to fly and wouldn't get onto the
Steve.
plane. That's it.
Yep.
And when they arrived, they said to me, "Barry, we're a man down, but would you mind awfully maybe going in front of the camera?" And I thought, "Yeah, whatever. That's fine." And it turned out that those particular shows, and especially the Irish ones, turned out to be some of the highest ratings within the show's history. And about maybe 2 3 months later, I was at home, and I got a phone call from LA, and they said, "Barry, we're doing a spin-off show in which the team will be traveling, internationally, looking for paranormal phenomena, and we would love to know if you would consider coming on board." And I said, "Yeah, okay, let's do it." That was it.
Well, now, what was that like? Because when you speak to different members of the GHI team, you get different. Um, they all had fun, but they
Mm.
said it was a lot of work. They really
Oh,
didn't
yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
in any place.
Yeah, a lot of work. In fact, 20 minutes of filming took us a week. Or
Right.
sorry, 20 minutes of what you see on TV took us
Mm-hmm.
a week of filming. There's a lot of work going into it, and you've got a 45-minute episode within there's 2 weeks, and so you're away from family and you're away from friends all that time. In fact, I think the first year I was back in Ireland 4 weeks of that year.
Wow.
So that can be a tough one, and I know that whenever we went to the southern hemisphere, um, we tended to go in the winter, and because maybe it was because it was cheaper or what, or maybe the darker months or whatever. But we headed down there, and I can remember, I think it was the second season that I flew. I went from the winter and flew into the winter and flew back to the winter. And I never ever forgot that. That was something I could never get over. For some bizarre reason, I don't know why. I missed out on a summer. But even to the point where you left Austria at the time, and you went to Dubai, and across from Dubai then down into Australia, and then up into Japan, and then across America and down into Europe again and back into Austria. You fly around I actually flew around the entire planet. Now that's a big thing or not a big thing for people, of course, that are jet setters, but certainly for me it was huge, and I have no wish to do it again. It was a one-time deal.
Well, you got to see the world a little bit when you were,
Through a window anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, yeah, through the car window, and somebody was driving by and stuff like that. You know, how did you go from now? So GHINs.
Mhm.
How did you get to where you are today? Because you're an accomplished author. I mean, I didn't just mention one book or two books. I mean, we could be on here 7 different times talking
Mm.
about 7 or 8 different books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How did you go from sci-fi to that?
Well, to me, it was always important that I continued the work and I was giving something back to the community. That was always important to me, to give back, because I had the opportunity to meet with other faiths, cultures, and from that experience in GHI, I was able to see that even in the southern hemisphere, although they were interpreting the entity itself as different, it was the phenomena in which it interacted with them remained the same. And this went from Australia to Africa to Brazil to Peru, all over the world. We hold on a second, we're dealing with the same bloody thing. How can the Aborigines in Australia be dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with up in Ireland? It makes no sense. Until we started, stripping it all back and looking at it. And then looking at the biology and how the phenomena interacts with us and everything else, I wanted to break that down and bring it to the group, bring it to the community, to say, this is what happens. If you prepare for that, then we can take the next steps. So that was always important to me, to be giving back to the community. The community supported me, and I wanted to support the community.
Well, they voted you the sexiest man. Uh, and I'm sorry, until I did research for this show, I did not know that. It actually gave me the laugh to keep going for all of that. But just because I've mentioned it 3 times, how did that come about?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Was it a magazine or something like that? I think.
It could well have been. I literally can't remember. It was on while we were doing the show, and like, we
Hmm.
finished the show 12 or no 10 years ago now, a decade ago we finished filming. So yeah, so I can't remember how that actually come about. It amused me to no end, but there you
Well,
go.
there were people that they were showing posts, I guess, MySpace probably back then, and people were like, "Oh, Barry, we love you." Okay, relocate here to the States, and okay, and some of those pictures probably were posted by them. Okay, that they had found. That's how I was
Mm-hmm.
even able to find them. Okay, I got 2 questions because I know we're running out of time.
Hmm.
Um, 3 questions. let's start with the first one. Where can people find out more about you and your books?
If they pop across to my Facebook, there'll be details there, and they can also pop across to my website, which is charmstealer.com,
Mm.
and they'll find details there. Generally, a search on Google will get them through. The latest book, The Deceptions of Gods and Men, is available in hardback, paperback, audiobook, and ebook.
Kindle. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's even on
and
Kindle.
it's available on Amazon.
Yeah. Because I was using, that's how I read it, was from Kindle.
Hmm. Hmm.
Stuff that's on there. Okay, now I'm going to ask the super question before I ask the easy one. Okay, so what do you believe we are investigating? Do you believe it's spirits, ghosts? I'm just going to go through a course of things like UFOs. What is it? Angels? What else is there? What are we seeing? What do you believe? Because you've seen a lot of it now, much more than we have. What do you believe is?
I do believe that there is a source for it,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm tracking. That's what I'm now doing is tracking that, and in areas that I never thought I was ever going to be. Um, the idea of this deception is it can't be understated. There is a huge amount of deception involved, and we have to be very very careful about what we're calling in. Angels are another perfect example. Angels didn't exist before 584 BC.
Mhm.
So if they didn't exist before then, what are we calling in? And when we look at the idea of the shining ones and things like that, there is a deception there as well as being applied, and the likes of images of Our Lady and things like that that appear. We need to be very very careful of those. Lourdes is a perfect example. When Bridget seen, or sorry, Bernadette, when Bernadette seen this apparition that stepped out from the cave, we have to look at the first initial contact and not what it has been smoothed into now today in France. Because in the first initial contact, Bridget referred to it as that thing, not Our Lady. She didn't know what the hell she was looking at.
Mhm.
It was that thing, and that speaks volumes. And also, we have to look at the perspective, and the details in which biologically what was happening to the people at that moment. They were in fear. Their bodies were they weren't able to move. That speaks volumes. If something is out for your benefit, you don't freeze in fear.
And
So
if it's Mary, you're not going to be in fear either.
no. And Medjugorje is a perfect example as well. Over in Eastern Europe, the Pope himself has even said that that is not the mother of Jesus, and he says the mother of Jesus is not a postmistress who delivers messages every Tuesday.
Right.
That's something else. We need to be very, very careful and challenge it. And this is the important thing. We need to challenge what's coming through. And I'll make it perfectly clear that if something is coming through and is communicating with us, whether it be with flashy lights from some device, or whether it be from a Ouija board, or whether it be from whatever it's manifesting, whatever the case may be, if we're not sure, ask the questions, get clarity. And I can assure you, if that particular being, entity, whatever you want to call it, is there for your benefit, it will not mind answering a few questions for clarity. But I can guarantee you, as there's a hole in a duck's ass, the moment that you start questioning it and not accepting the narrative that it wants you to believe, it'll clear off, because it cannot be found out. The moment it's found out, it loses its ability.
Well, the book, I want to say to our listeners who usually know we go like sometimes another half hour, 40 minutes. We got to remember this is in Ireland we're talking about right now, where it's what, 2 a.m., I believe?
2 a.m., just
Right,
gone 2
probably
a.m.
right on the mark, 2 a.m. So I don't want to keep Barry forever. And I really appreciate that he stayed up. I
Thank
thought
you.
it was midnight, And then I forgot about the hour change, and he told me, no, it's 1 a.m., okay, before we got on the air. And I was like, wow, okay, and now I really, really feel bad. Okay, so the new book is called The Deception of Gods and Men.
Hmm.
He told you where you can get it. We only touched very lightly over the book.
Hmm.
I jumped around in different parts of it because it's a book that you have to read. Okay,
Hmm.
and I think I'm going to actually purchase the book because I really do want to sit down and read it all the way through and not on my computer when I'm
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
read it. It's
Hmm.
that kind of a book, and I don't buy that many books, and that's going to be one of them that I
Thank
want
you.
to buy because it's really good book. So my last question, which is always an easier one, okay, and I end the show with all the time. So what's ahead for 2023?
Well, I'm working on the next book, Beyond the Veil. I have another book behind that as well, the Fruit of the Gods. I'm also working on a film project at the moment, which is an amalgamation of archaeology and high strangeness on a remote island here in Ireland. So I'm combining those two, and the story that's developing from that is exceptional, absolutely exceptional, and also brings us back not just hundreds of years, but now we're going back thousands of years, and showing something highly bizarre that is still going on at the site today.
Well, I want to say to people, if you've never been to Ireland, we were talking before we went on the air. It is one of the most beautiful countries you ever want to go. You're going to go to Dublin, like he said. I hope you got out of Dublin. Yeah, I did. We were just sleeping there. Okay, but other than that, you start going out into the country, you're not going to want to come back.
Hmm.
I mean, I have friends that keep saying, when I die, before I die, that's where I want to go and live.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I decided Florida, but
Yeah,
I could talk the wife out of that one. But Barry, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight.
thank you very much.
It's actually been a pleasure having you. When the new book comes out, if we can talk to you then, we don't have to cover all this other stuff, and we can start hot and heavy right into the book.
Great
So,
stuff.
so thanks for coming on, and thanks for watching us tonight, and hope to see you again next week.
Thank you.
Our guest this evening, you may know from the Sci Fi Channel. He's appeared in Ghost Hunters,